Hello and welcome to the Brothers Random Show. My name is Travis.
And I'm Michael.
And we are two ordinary brothers discussing extraordinary ideas and some random shit. So the topics on this show range from theology, masculinity, stories, movies, philosophy, books, pop culture, and many other subjects. We often talk about the people we admire and the wisdom they share, people such as Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, who we believe is the sage of our time. Michael, why are we here?
Today we are talking about Jordan Peterson's Exodus seminars that he did. We getting back to it because it's been a little while. We're on episode 7 of the Exodus seminars, where him and colleagues get together and talk about Exodus.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Turns out that a book is more durable than stone. It's more durable than a castle. It's more durable than an empire. You don't get away with anything. And so you might think you can bend the fabric of reality and that you can treat people instrumentally and that you can bow to the tyrant and violate your conscience without cost. You will pay the piper. It's going to call you out of that slavery into freedom, even if that pulls you into the desert.
God is ethic-centered, not ethnic-centered.
Well, do you want the Pharaoh on your side or do you want God on your side? That's kind of the question.
Which one thing that's different now from when we started doing this is these episodes used to be all behind the paywall on Daily Wire. Now they have been consistently releasing them out on YouTube. I want to say even maybe now all of them are on, but it's really cool to see like this episode had 350,000 views. So to think that it's reaching such a wider audience now that they've thrown it up on YouTube rather than it being behind the paywall of Daily Wire, which is great. Like Daily Wire is a business. They want to, but it's kind of neat because it's like, well, let's use this as advertising to get more people to
the Daily Wire. Yeah.
To the Daily Wire.
Yeah. This is kind of like after this is mostly what they talk about is when the Israelites have left Egypt and they're wandering through the desert. And this is after. So on this episode that we're talking about today, it's mostly taking place after the parting of the Red Sea. Yeah.
So parting the Red Sea happens. The Red Sea closes down on Pharaoh's chariots. And now technically the Israelites are free from tyranny. And this is kind of what they're dealing with after the fact that they're free from tyranny. The first things I noticed was that they point out, and if you read the story, you realize this pretty soon as well, but they pass through the Red Sea, this miraculous thing, and the Red Sea closes in on the chariots. They're saved, and it doesn't go very long before they start complaining again that and losing faith that they're doing the right thing.
This is what I thought was interesting about this. They talk about miracles, and proof is not very lasting. Like the proof that God exists doesn't last, because they've seen these miracles, and then within, it feels it's very early in the story, but I'm assuming like months later or maybe years later, people, the Israelites are pretty much going, we don't believe anymore, even though we've seen these miraculous things. And so this is kind of like what nowadays when people see, it's like the news nowadays. Like you'll hear something in the news, like, and then within 24 hours something else will be in the news and you will have completely forgot about the thing.
It's the forgetfulness. And they talk a lot about kind of ceremony in this a little bit, where they need want to be reminding yourself of the
Miracles.
the miracles, right? The miracles, faith versus proof, but that faith you need to like be reminding yourself.
Well, it's like
that,
Passover. Passover
Yeah.
is reminding the Israelites that there was this miracle that happened. And so it's
Yeah.
a excuse me, it's a ritual that it's a ritual that pretty much makes you remember. And we in our previous episode we talked about the importance of ritual, praying and working out and brushing your teeth and that sort of thing. But this kind of takes on a different aspect because the Israelites have seen miracles and then they turn into unbelievers because time has passed, and
Yeah.
One of the dignitaries says something about how human beings are we are a forgetful species. We tend to not, it goes, and Joe Rogan, I recently listened to an episode of his that where he was talking about the construction of the pyramids, and nobody knows who constructed the pyramids. Everybody assumes it was the Egyptians, but it's like that they're so old and they're constructed in such a way that we never would have had the technology. So we have forgotten whatever technology they used to build the pyramids. And it's an interesting, and that's the same thing that the Israelites are doing. They're just forgetting that they've seen these miracles, these wonders. And now here they are complaining in the desert.
Dennis Prager kind of points out that, people, faith versus proof. You'll have atheists be like, well, give me the proof. Like if it was real, this would happen. Right. And the point in this story a little bit is saying that even with the proof, if you don't have the right mindset, then a little bit after it's been proven, you'd be back to square one, complaining and hating on the entity of the universe.
It might just be part of being a human being, right? Is to just always be, when things aren't going right, to just always be going, why God, or is there a God, or so this is what nihilistic people do. Like
I think it goes back to the spirit of Cain versus
Cain.
I really do think that it goes back to that. If you're the type that's going to find fault, you're going to find the fault. Like you will, I'm in sales and I hear this a lot, but by people that are, encouraging other people to go out and sell, it's like the world isn't as it is. It's you see the world as you are. So you don't see the world as it is, you see the world as you are. And if you are having a bad attitude, like everybody you go talk to isn't going to want to talk to you.
Yeah.
So you have to fix here before
you go
anything out in your world is going to change. And so, and I think that's kind of the point here is that, and this is a story of people who were in bondage and now they're free. And it's kind of like, oh shoot, now we got to figure this out. Right.
Yeah. They have to figure out how to self-govern. And that's one of the things is that they talk about, Miriam starts a song and what was interesting is they called Miriam a prophetess in this chapter. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And we come from a religion that women aren't prophets in the religion, even though in the Bible it's got Miriam, they call Miriam a prophetess.
Oh yeah, and she's not the only one. Deborah was a famous Israelite prophetess. So, and she told men what to do.
Yeah. So it's like when people get up on their high horse about the Bible being misogynistic, it's like, well, not really.
Yeah. Or is the church that you're in currently misogynistic? Yeah.
Maybe that's it.
Maybe that's it.
I thought that was interesting, but so she leads the Israelites in a kind of song prayer, and they go into this very like deep. So, and Pajo talks about how the national anthem, this would be something similar to the national anthem, about how
kind of a song and prayer. Yeah.
A song and prayer. And it's basically everybody all at once doing something. Like, so when you get up for the national anthem, or when you put your hand over your heart, and you hear the Pledge of Allegiance, it's like the spirit of voluntary unity, or what Oz Guinness, I think, says freely chosen consent. It's you choosing freely to stand up with everybody and acknowledge the greatness that has come before, kind of. And that's a great way to, and then Horowitz kind of shoots it to shit and says, well, you have a lot of, when you're in a cult, he's like, you have a lot of pressure to be like everybody else. But
everybody else is getting up, and Jordan Peterson talks a little bit about the standing ovation. Right. Like,
and you don't want to be the one person standing there. Like, I didn't like, and they'd use Cats as the example, the play, the musical. Horowitz is like, well, what if I didn't like Cats, and then am I just gonna sit down and not clap with when they get a standing ovation? It's like,
right.
Yeah. So I mean,
exactly.
But that's where Oz was like, freely chosen consent. It must be freely chosen consent. And so everybody's singing the song, but also they're telling you, don't just sing it because everybody else is doing it. Do it because you also have seen the miracles and you also have experienced this. So, and that's where ritual comes back in. They talk a lot about ritual. The last two episodes, they've talked a ton about ritual.
A lot. Yeah. I thought it was interesting. They were talking a little bit about how they're kind of at the beginnings of the start of a nation. And so you're starting to see some of these things will start to happen where they get out of tyranny, and then they have to kind of figure out how they're going to start to govern themselves. And that's where Jethro comes in, and he talks to Moses and is like, you can't do this by yourself. You've got to put other leaders, leaders over 100, leaders over 10, like out there, so that it's not all coming directly to you. And that's kind of setting up a pyramid, if you will, of
authority.
Authority. But I was also a line of authority. Yeah. So that's right. A line of authority that people can go through to kind of get justice. So, and these things are kind of happening where they're figuring these things out because they're building a nation. Right. And the US kind of needed to go through that. Now they had the US, our founding fathers studied history like crazy. They were studying things like the Israelites leaving tyranny, also how the Saxons had set up their
government, how the Greeks set up their government, like
the Republic.
So they were all learning this and taking the best parts of it to add to the
how
United
do we
States.
take all of this information and let's create a more perfect union.
Yeah. And so it really is like the birth of a nation that they're dealing with. And that's where the 40 years in the desert come from. Mm-hmm. And Jordan Peterson always likes to say, well, once you've left tyranny, then you're also like wandering around. And one of the, I forget who said it, but one of them says, well, people don't always want to be free. They want to be taken care of.
Oh, that was Prager, Dennis Prager. He said people don't yearn to be free, they yearn to be taken care of.
Yeah.
So I had to write that down because I was just like, this is this is Gen Z.
This is Gen Z. Yeah, this is their problem. No, how many of them vote, but then all of them have an opinion about who our leaders are, and they don't vote. Yeah. So it's like, so the highest voters are people basically in their 60s, which is like, I think generation that's not Generation X. Is that Generation X? It might be the generation right before X.
50s.
Yeah.
Generation X.
Yeah. 50s is Generation X.
It's just pointing. He's like, how many politicians just get up there and they're just like, well, I'll give you this and I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Just and like,
you don't have to do anything.
Free lunch.
You don't have to work. Yeah. Free lunch.
You vote for me and you'll get free lunch, which never happens because that's not how the system can function.
Yeah.
And they get voted in by promising those things because that's how they get voted.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants that free, everybody so many people see that and they want to get that free lunch.
It's a bit of a messed up. It is a truism, but it's messed up because people don't want responsibility of their own destiny, right?
Yeah. Well, and Jordan Peterson kind of pushed back on him a little bit. He's to Dennis. He's like, yeah, well, I mean, deep down, people are looking for responsibility. They are looking for meaning. We kind of have to guide them to that.
But you could argue that that's what's wrong with generation. This generation is that they don't. It's because they're
not seeking that.
They're not seeking that.
They're
not seeking.
So that would be
purpose,
the problem. Is like we kind of have to teach them. We have to teach them that there's something more than just being given out a free hand.
Yeah.
Right. That there's respect for yourself when you accomplish hard things, when you push through hard things, a job for years that you didn't really like, but you did it anyways because it was providing. We're going to push through hard things.
Yeah. And that's really what I think is lost on this new generation. Is that they're having a hard time deciphering between what is the good of having hardship and seeking it out, because they're in the middle of like the handout. They want the free lunch, the politicians' free lunch, so it's like, it's like, and now we're at a point with our country that the free lunch is kind of collapsing in on itself. Inflation is brutal, and there's 7 million men in our country that of able-bodied
that do not they aren't working. They're not working, part of the workforce. Yeah.
It's like, what is that? It's basically the guy waiting for a free lunch and shirking his responsibilities.
Right.
As a citizen.
Makes you wonder how much of that is similar to the Israelites, because I mean, they went through a long period of time, and they talk about it here where God provides them with meat in the evening, which was in quails, birds that they were able to just, I think they just felt from the description, they were just falling into camp.
And
they would eat them. And in the mornings, manna.
Yeah, manna.
And even nowadays we'll say manna from heaven or something like that, being like good things. But manna was basically just like a bread that kind of just sprouted up around them, and they would just step out of their tents and eat it. So they were kind of, I don't know, in this sense, they were almost like being handed everything to them.
And which is why they keep complaining, right?
Probably.
So they say like there's this country in South America, I believe, that is where the people are the happiest. Mm-hmm. They've done studies on these people, and it's because everything that they have is worked hard for. They don't have electricity, they don't have, but they're happiest. And it's also because it comes down to like, okay, they had hardship to get this food or this water. They had to, cultivate it or in some way. And that hardship breeds, that purpose breeds happiness.
So maybe it's like being grateful for what you have because you worked hard for it.
Because we work hard for it. So this is a concept that all the gurus talk about. It's like, don't pursue happiness. The problem with that is our whole society is predicated on just pursuing happiness. What we should be pursuing is excellence and
meaning
meaning and purpose.
Purpose.
Meaning, purpose, and excellence. And if we're pursuing those, then what comes to us is happiness in the process of getting those. And that's what I think that's what was happening with the Israelites. They're getting given all this stuff and they still are complaining all the time. And a little bit of their faith is shaken by not having enough, basically. So it's like the guy, the farmer toiling in the field, and he's like going, why, God, why are you doing this to me? Kind of thing. And we all have experienced that, where it's just like, oh man, I'm just trying so hard and nothing's kind of working out. But the answer isn't the nihilism of Cain, because that's what most people go to. Because if they aren't getting rewards for their hard work, people tend to go to the spirit of Cain. Whereas we should be basically grateful in spite of our suffering.
Why God, were my sacrifice is not accepted when Abel's were, and now I want kill that received blessings.
The highest good. I want to kill the highest good. And see, that's what we see way too much of that in our society.
It's I don't think they talk about it here as much, but it is interesting that they leave a tyranny, but the Israelites actually have kind of this oh crap moments where they almost want to go back to the tyranny. At least we were fed, at least we had food in Egypt, right? It's like leaving the safe walled city,
the known,
and then going out into the unknown, where there could hardship and could be starvation and plagues and blah blah, like all these things that could happen out in the unknown, leaving the safety of the walled city, going out into the unknown.
People don't realize that basically past the unknown, past the hardship, is where the promised land is.
It's like beyond fear is success. I think that's how the quote goes. Beyond fear, there's that tranquility. So you
You got to go
You
through
have
the
to-
fire, right? You got to
Yeah.
get through the fire to get, and some people never make it there. And that's where nihilism comes in. So but you can't give in to that, because nihilism then destroys the highest good. So
Yeah.
you can see where all of the tracks are laid. And you as a human being have to make choices that are for the greater good.
Yeah.
Even if things aren't going to work out. I wouldn't necessarily say my life has worked out myself, but I'm always striving to keep going. And as long as I keep that up, then maybe there will be a promised land at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? That's what I think everybody's probably working for.
Yeah.
I liked this idea that they talk about with Moses. He needs Joshua and Hur to hold up his arms, because they're in a battle. So they end up getting out of Egypt, and then they end up fighting with other tribes. And one of these tribes is winning every time without Moses
Moses
help.
has to keep his arms up. As long as he keeps his arms up, they'll win.
Yeah, and essentially praying, like getting God to help out, and he can't keep his arms up, so he needs Joshua and Hur to help. And they go into this, and it's interesting because all leaders need help. That's kind of what that says. Like all leadership needs their need, and Joshua's holding up his hand, so Joshua became his right hand man. So it's kind of like that concept. I thought that was a really cool concept, because they talk about how all leaders need help, so they can't just do it on their own. Which is why Moses started doing the governance of spreading out the governance, because he can't as one man run everything, because then that's another form of tyranny, right? That's another dictatorship.
It is. That's a dictatorship.
And he easily could have fallen into that. He could have just been their king. Like they could, and I think
is it apocryphal, or do you think it's true that Washington was asked to be a king?
Yeah.
And he's
like, no, we can't.
And he didn't want to do that.
Washington was a religious man, so he would have known this story. He would have been reading the Bible heavily, even though there's some people who believe that he might have been a bit atheistic. I think he was just a realist, and that he used much of what Jordan Peterson's doing with these Bible stories. He's using them as guides. And he must have known that they would have, after winning the Revolutionary War, they would have tried making him the king. And he knew that wasn't the answer. There needed to be something else, because a king makes for a tyrant.
Yeah, it sounds like he was camped at Newborough, New York, written for the Army officers by Colonial Louis Nicola. It proposed that Washington should become the king of the United States. Yeah, so it sounds like that might be a true story. I thought maybe it was apocryphal, but at the end of the originally, many people in America and Europe thought Washington would retain the reins of power to become the leader of the new nation, or even king. Interesting. That's
well, we've always heard those stories, right? A man, it's a good leader who can relinquish power, and he didn't want to be king. A lot like Maximus in Gladiator. Like he didn't want to be a general forever. He wanted to go home and farm.
He wanted to destroy the tyranny and then give it back to the Republic, which is supposed to be the sign of a good leader, also upholding others in leadership, right? So Joshua eventually kind of became the leader after Moses.
Yeah, they talk about his basically ascent as a as a leader. Moses would basically get the commandments from God, and then Moses would tell Joshua, and Joshua would carry out the rules, because Joshua was actually
execute.
And Joshua was actually like a military leader mostly. He fought their wars, and while they were trying to build a nation. And I mean, so for people who believe that Israel has no claim to the land that they're on currently, that they've found artifacts from this time that have Hebrew writings on them. So it's not like they don't have a claim to it, because archaeologists have found ancient writings that have Hebrew writings on them. So I mean, take that for what it is, but that's something we're going through right now. But they kind of go off on a tangent about malevolence, and Jordan Peterson talks about malevolence. This is towards the end of the episode. He talks about malevolence is what causes trauma, not tragedy. People can get through tragedy. It's malevolence that usually causes trauma. And he says
PTSD.
PTSD. Yeah. So, and he says I don't remember how this relates to the story, but he says specifically, betrayal by someone you love causes trauma. Which I thought was interesting because they got into it a little bit, and he was like, and I think it had something to do with there was maybe the Israelites were suffering trauma after going through the desert for so many years, I believe. And he was like, well, trauma isn't usually brought on by tragedy. It's usually brought on by malevolence. So if there's somebody that does something to you, that's usually traumatic. And so, and he gets into, he talks about, this was really interesting. So he had clients who were creators. They would create stuff, and he says that when they felt their most non-nihilistic was when they were actually creating. And so he says, like, most people, if they're creating something or building something, getting something out of them into the real world, that's like one of the best things to combat nihilism.
Yeah.
Which is why Moses started getting them involved in their own governance, right? Moses started the building blocks of our own nation, where he was basically like, here's one tier of governance below me, and then another tier, and that's where I believe the 70 come in, and what else?
Probably the Sanhedrin. The 70s. And then but in our own nation, it's kind of it's supposed to be set up a little bit like that, because you have your city, you have your city council, you have your mayor, that is voted in, all of which are voted in, and then above that you've got your county commissioners. And
so you got the city, county, state,
and then the state, you vote for your governor, and then outside that, obviously, voting for your president or something like that. But really, ultimately, it's interesting that people freak out so much about the president, but you should probably be more concerned about who your governor is,
because he has more of
he probably has way more of an impact on you and your day-to-day life than the president.
Except for when inflation is involved, right?
If we can get those gas prices down, maybe.
Do you have anything else to add about this episode?
No, I really do like that about the Moses needing help in his leadership, needing help from others. I
which is
I
why
think
we set up.
that's really
At one point, I thought that's why we set up president and vice president, right? We were supposed to have, one was supposed to be kind of helping with the burden of the leaders leading the country, right? So
yeah, that's really cool.
Audience, when you get a chance, check out the Exodus episodes by Jordan Peterson that we are continuing to go through, although very kind of slowly. We're gonna put out probably one episode every quarter or something like that. They used to be on the paywall, but now they're releasing them on YouTube, which is great. So a lot more people can see them. They are very fascinating and interesting. And check us out on social media, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just look for the Sword in the Skull. In the meantime, keep listening, keep reading, keep watching, learn more. We'll see you, brother.
See ya.